So I think we are in a situation in which we can save lives, and not only save lives, but we can help to improve the quality of people's lives, the quality of people who are in extreme poverty, by providing assistance. And although there are different kinds of assistance we can provide, sometimes we have skills that we can offer that may be useful, we can volunteer our time. But for most people living in the developed nations, providing money to provide specific kinds of aid is probably the best thing to do, whether it's to provide safe drinking water or sanitation or health clinics or better agricultural techniques or infrastructure to help people to connect with export markets, a whole lot of different things that we do that we can provide. So I think the parallel with the situation of rescuing the child in the pond is still one that holds to a significant extent. We still face choices about what we are spending our money on as compared with what the money could do to reduce poverty and to save lives in developing countries. And that gives rise to this moral issue that I'm talking about in the book, which is how much should we be doing in that kind of situation. Now, it's true that one difference between the situation of global poverty and the situation of the child in the pond is that in the case of the child in the pond, there's only one child there, and there's no reason to believe that there will be more falling into the pond once you've rescued this one. So you may say, well, I'll wade into the pond. Of course, I will ruin my shoes and have to replace them, but still, by wading into the pond, I'll have solved the problem. I'll get the child out of the pond, I'll find the parents, they must be somewhere, I'll return the child to them, I'll buy a new pair of shoes, and that's the end of it. But it is true that in the situation of world poverty, that's not the end of it, because while you might say, you make the parallel exact, well, I'll calculate how much it would cost me to save a life. It may be approximately the same as an expensive pair of shoes, depending on whether you're really buying the most upmarket pair of shoes and depending on the varying estimates that we have. I discuss this in the book of the cost of saving a life. So I'll do that. I'll send the money to some aid organisation, and then I'll have done what I should do. But of course it isn't obvious that you have then done what you should do, because unlike the case of the child in the pond, even if you have probably saved one life, there are millions more lives to be saved. And none of us has the resources to save all of them. Not even Bill Gates has the resources to save all of them. So we then have to say, okay, so I've given the cost of an expensive pair of shoes, or given the cost of what is necessary to save one life, but I'm still living a comfortable life. I've still got various luxuries that I don't really need. And I think nearly all of us do have those kinds of luxuries. A lot of people may say, well, I don't live a luxurious life. I'm not really super rich and I live quite simply. So one of the examples I use in the book is to ask yourself, have you bought water? Have you bought bottled water? So that's something you paid for. When the water that comes out of the tap, and I'm glad to see that Krista has provided tap water for us today, but the water that comes out of the tap where you live is safe to drink. So if you buy bottled water, or for that doesn't have to be water, if you buy something else, a soft drink or a cup of coffee at a cafe, these are luxuries where you're probably spending about as much as someone living in extreme poverty has to live on and feed their family for the whole day. So it is something that is definitely a luxury by those standards. According to the World Bank, there are 1.4 billion people living in extreme poverty, which it defines as not having enough income to reliably meet their basic needs, and the current world poverty level is the purchasing power equivalent of $1.25 US. Now, the purchasing power equivalent means it's not actually what you would get if you took that amount of US currency and went to a bank in Mozambique, let's say, and said, please convert this to your local currency. Because it's the amount in Mozambique that buys the same amount of goods and services that you can buy for $1.25 in the United States. So it already takes into account the fact that the purchasing power of $1.25 US is greater in Mozambique than it is in New York, say, and it adjusts it for that. So we're really talking about very little money. We might be talking about, in terms of actual foreign exchange conversion rates, we might be talking about 75 cents or even 50 cents that families have to live on. So significantly less than you would pay for the bottle of water or the cup of coffee. So that's what I mean when I say even after you've given a certain amount to save a life, you probably are still living a life in which you're buying, spending on a number of luxuries which you could not spend on, and you could accumulate the money that you don't spend on those luxuries, and you could save more lives with that money. So that's why the principle that the example of the child in the pond seems to lead to is a very demanding principle. It seems to suggest that, well, if you can't compare a child's life with the cost of a pair of shoes, then you also can't compare the value of saving a child's life with your desire for bottled water or some other kind of drink, or any of the other unnecessary items that we spend money on. So it seems like it's a very demanding ethic that says you have to really impoverish yourself. You have to get down to the level where you're not spending anything on luxuries at all before you could really feel that you've done enough, that you've really done everything that you're obliged to do. So that's the position that I set at the start of the book. And then I examine objections to it of various kinds, and I look at some psychological questions about why we don't give more aid, and I then come, in the conclusion of the book, to considering this objection that the principle is so demanding that it's not really, couldn't really be a part of a reasonable morality to recommend to human beings, because we're not saints and we're not likely to live up to it. So I don't have time now to go into all of the objections that I consider. Some of them are philosophical objections, that, for example, things like, don't we have an obligation to those in our own community before we look overseas? And if we have poverty in our own community, isn't that something we should do something about first? Which may be an objection that's more likely to be made in the United States, perhaps, than it is here, where the extremes of wealth and poverty are greater than they are here, and there isn't the same kind of social security system and safety net for people in poverty in the United States that there is here. But no doubt it's also something that people may say here too, that charity begins at home.